If you have watched any of my other presentations or segments, I identify as Aspie, Asperger's, or neurodivergent. And part of neurodivergency is allowing each person to choose what they best identify with. So this may not be the term of preference for all. One of the first things I would recommend to teachers as you establish a relationship with your student on the spectrum is that it's important to know what they identify with. And many may not have come to acceptance with their label and may not wish to be referred to any label. So the first tip is to understand where on the spectrum the student may be and what they identify with or not at all. Non-acceptance or not wanting to identify may be common for K through 12 students. After all, there's so much pressure to fit in and be neurotypical or mimic NT behaviors. I really didn't accept my label until college. So I have some tips that teachers helped me get through kindergarten through 12th grade. So these are just kind of some things that teachers did to help me. The first thing a teacher did to help me was help me form connections with my peers. Throughout elementary school years, I was constantly moved from one teacher to another or from one school to another. This kind of made me feel like teachers and principals didn't really want me and they didn't really want to have me. And when I felt unwanted or disrespected, it was really hard to show respect in return. But there were two teachers that really went out of their way to include me. I felt loved and wanted and respected in the classroom and would try anything and everything I could to not let them down. The first teacher I would call Teacher 2 in a lower elementary. I think it was my 3rd grade year when she had an after-school party at her house for all of her 3rd grade female students. There were only 9 of us at the time. It was super fun. We played board games, hide and seek, and watched movies. She also tried to keep my friends close to me in class. I always had at least one of my friends at the table cluster. She worked with me on how to get involved with the other girls and helped them, including me, at the after-school party and in class. My biggest regret for a long time was letting this teacher down and eventually getting expelled from that school for eloping and meltdowns. I finished 2nd grade there and most of 3rd grade, and that was the longest I'd ever spent at one school. However, this is when I started to realize that I was different than everyone else. I had 2 teachers and 2 classrooms. I had pulled out support, a parapro, or a shadow when I was in the mainstream classroom. And I realized the other students didn't have those. That was just for me. But even though the administrator had me removed, I know this teacher was doing her best to include me and support me, and I still remember her and have positive feelings about her. In 5th grade, I had my first for real best friend. My teacher knew a girl in my class that lived in her neighborhood and thought we would be great friends. And we were. She sat me next to this student, put us in projects together, and this was the grade that I had a best friend for the first time in school. This grade was a very good memory, and I'm so thankful for my teacher that she made the extra effort to help me connect with another student. On the opposite side of things, one teacher helped me see that I was being bullied. My 9th grade bio teacher noticed subtle bullying signs that I didn't even know was happening. My 9th grade teacher contacted my mom and my caseworker at school when she saw a group of kids excluding me. Even their parents were reaching out to her asking that I not be put in a group project, and she was noticing their attitude toward me. She took the time to make sure I was okay and that my mom knew what was going on. While there was nothing we could really do to stop the covert bullying and exclusion, but it was nice to know that a teacher had my back and was watching out for me. Tip number 2, keep me productive at all times. The other teacher who always had my back in 7th grade was my 7th grade math teacher. Math has always been very stressful for me in school. It's not that it was hard. I'm actually pretty good at math, and it was always pretty easy to understand. But I would make careless errors from going too fast, and my biggest pet peeve was redoing my work. And I had dysgraphia and dyscalculia, so these were added stressors for me. Even though I'm told my IQ is high, these learning difficulties would cause many frustrations in math. I was most prone to getting frustrated or having a panic attack. I also had a girl in this class that would pick on me or give me a hard time. Not only did this teacher notice a change in my behavior, but she personally took care of the problem. If she saw that I was getting stressed, she would offer to take me out on a walk through the school. We would run errands like going to make copies, stapling packets together, and all sort of mind-easing things. This was middle school, so she knew how to help me save face so I would not be called out or help notice when I was in a meltdown or a panic mode, so I would not have to have one in front of my peers. She knew my stress tells and was ready to be preventative and protective in a way that helped me feel like I could trust her. Please do not give me busy work. Please give me projects or assignments that keep me engaged and are exciting to learn about. Tip number 3 is help me get involved. My math teacher in 7th grade was also my drama teacher. I signed up for drama club, per my mother's request, to help me become more social. She felt drama or theater could help me with performance anxiety and make friends. Although she was right, and I hated it, I hated the long practices after school when all I wanted to do was go home. I hated that some of the people who picked on me were also in drama club, and so I couldn't escape them. I hated being on stage. I hated being in the spotlight when all I wanted to do was run and hide. I hated the audition, where I had to sing in front of people. I still remember that audition. The pianist started to play the music, I froze, and I eloped out of the room and I started crying. My band teacher and my math teacher came out to check on me. I was way too anxious to audition. I couldn't do it. I was too scared to hear what people thought about me. I called my mom to come pick me up. However, a couple hours later, I was so ashamed of myself that I ran away and how I gave into fear that I asked my mom if she could take me back to school so I could finish my audition. My math and band teacher were so happy to see that I gained the courage to come back, and they were more than happy to accommodate me. They didn't judge me or make me feel ashamed for leaving, but congratulated me on my courage to try again. I didn't audition in front of them. Instead, I sang behind them, that way I couldn't see their reactions. I was able to make it through the audition and got the part of a choral dancer. I was surprised my mom and my teachers, who knew that was a big step for me to come back. It's still one of my proudest moments of middle school. These teachers' reactions and non-judgmental help helped me conquer my fear, and I was accepted for who I was. Tip number 4, get to know my stressors. For my 4th grade year, I returned to homeschool. My mom was one strict teacher. I hated math and I hated Spanish. They were my least favorite classes. And I can still remember the Spanish alphabet song all these years later. The perk of homeschool was whenever my mom and I would have a field trip, she would give me the option to do my math the night before so I wouldn't have to do it the next day, and we could spend more time on the field trip. We went to awesome places like the Creation Museum, the Renaissance Fair, and Winston-Salem. Riding a camel and the elephant was probably the highlight at the Renaissance Fair for any field trip. My mom taught me the core subjects as well as the STARS curriculum, something in my denomination, which is a Bible study program, to meet a Bible class requirement. I took art and voice lessons to fill an elective requirement of school with other instructors. My art teacher was sweet. She taught us to draw simple things step by step, and we would color and paint them however we wanted. She was very patient and helped me get my picture exactly the way I wanted it. My voice teacher was a lady from our church and a family friend. She also homeschooled her kids. I was never comfortable singing in front of a mirror, let alone in front for a lesson. So she helped me come out of my shell a little bit. She would even help me prepare a piece I would sing for my grandparents' vow renewal. I did not act out for my specialty teachers. I knew they were a privilege, and I knew if I acted up, I would never be allowed back. Even when I was stressed and scared, I kept all of my anxiety inside until I got home. Sorry you had to pay the price for that sometimes, Mom. I was not a perfect angel for my mom. There would be times in math or Spanish that they would be difficult, and I'd flip my little desk over, which was now stationed in the living room. I would flip over my little dry erase easel. I would get in trouble, but my mom was more than willing to work with me. She was able to tell the difference between an autistic meltdown and disobedience. She is the most understanding teacher I have and will ever have. So teachers, it's important to understand the diagnosis, the meltdown, and the panic, and what is disobedience or disrespect. They are not the same. My mom, as my teacher, learned the difference and learned my tells or stressors to share with my other teachers who were willing to listen and learn about them and ready to help out in the classroom. In middle school, I am so thankful that my first period was band, and my band instructor also had a son with Asperger's. I think he was one of 2 teachers in the school who truly understood me and wanted to help me. There were several times I had to step out of the band room in the morning when the band was warming up. I don't know if you've ever heard a beginning band, but for someone with sensory issues, all the squeaking and out-of-tune instruments was a very, very unpleasant sound at 9 in the morning. I couldn't stand it. So until the band learned how not to squeak as they warmed up, I was allowed to step out into the hall until they were done. He also had a very strict rule for percussion, but because I didn't want a reed or a mouthpiece instrument touching me, he took the extra time to help me learn the instrument in order to include me in the band. Tip number 5 is to treat your students with respect and kindness. Sometimes in interviews or after a conference, someone may ask, what does someone with autism think or feel about this or that? I have to fight my duh or sassy response, but I sometimes think educators forget in elementary school, the student is still a child and will do childish things. And in middle school and high school, there's still a teen trying to figure things out just like every other student. I'm a person first, so treating all students with respect, kindness, and understanding as to their difficulty, learning difference, or neurodivergence will set up a path for respectful relationships from a student on the spectrum and a teacher. As I've said throughout the segment, when I felt understood or respected, I did my best to return the favor. But when I figured out that teacher did not want me in his or her class, or saw me as the problem child and a struggling student, I lost my desire to muster all the energy and help I could inside myself to try hard for that teacher. It takes 2 or 3 times the effort to focus and pay attention and deal with sensory stuff and not want to run out of the class. To add that to a teacher who does not want me or like me to the mix, I analyze that extra effort as not worth it for this person at times, if I'm being completely honest. But I want to make sure all of you understand the bandwidth it took to be engaged and not have a meltdown in class is a lot for spectrum students. So for me, once I figured out nothing I did mattered and nothing would change this person's opinion of me, I would make a decision to whether or not to return that investment. Is the hard work worth that investment? If yes, I did my best and tried harder with all my issues, but if the answer was no, the answer was not there. The teachers I remember the most were on the 2 opposite extreme sides of the spectrum. Those who I knew did not like me, and those who I knew had my back and were willing to help me grow.